Hey, this is John from All the Way to 11. Today's video is on this Sporterized Mauser K98K. I thought this would be an interesting firearm to do a video on. One, because it's K98K, and two, because it is a Sporterized K98K. And I think the time period in which this rifle was Sporterized was a unique time period in the American firearms market. It's a period in which you could find K98Ks, Enfields, all kinds of different surplus firearms for just dirt cheap. So you'd never think twice about sporterizing it. And part of the way I think I've maybe determined around the era in which this was sporterized was from some of the aftermarket parts that are on it. But before we get into that, let's just kind of go over what kind of K98K this is. And there's a lot of information out there on K98Ks. This is just going to be a general overview of what this one is. If you want to add more as to what it is or when it was made and all that good stuff, go ahead and do it in the comments. So, start out, this is a, let's see, get the receiver ring up there without banging the camera too much. It's a BYF 44. That means it is made at Mauser Oldendorf in 1944. You can tell it's a late war. I mean, obviously 1944 is pretty late war in Europe. Late war K98K because of the stamped sheet metal trigger guard and magazine floor plate, and these screws are actually out of my K98K, so they don't fit this, but I thought it'd hold it together and make it look better. As you can tell as well, the receiver ring is left unpolished, and there are numbers and proofs and all that, and I'm not going to get too far into that on this. But to give you an example of a pre-war K98K and the way the receiver ring would have been finished, as I bang the camera pod, the tripod. And for some of you keen observers out there, you may notice this is a Mitchell's Mauser, which is the K98K that I have. Now, there are a lot of people that have a lot of problems with Mitchell's Mausers. I have a lot of issues with their advertising practices. And as far as the rifle itself, it was a gift to me, and I appreciate it no matter what because it's a K98K and it's really in pretty good shape. I'll make another video in the future getting more into the Mitchell's Mausers thing because, as I said, I don't like their advertising practices and some of the other things they've done, possibly, but I want to kind of make sure I know what they have done or what's been established that they did before I make any in-depth statements on it. So, anyway, all the people that don't like K98K Mausers, go ahead and comment below. Oh, or K98K Mitchell's Mausers, go ahead and comment below because there might be one or two of you. Anyway, generally, finer polish on the pre-war guns than the late war guns. Now, let's look at some of the things that have been changed on this to sporterize it. Probably the most obvious would be this bolt handle, which has been changed to a more low profile bolt handle. Go ahead and pull it out of here and drop the receiver on the table. Now, this is the original extractor and the original bolt, but as you can see, there's some fine welding there on that bolt handle. So this is an aftermarket piece, as well as this low profile safety. This is a Bueller, I may be pronouncing that wrong, low profile safety. And part of this is also part of where you can determine the age, and as you can see the serial number for the actual bolt here. But you can kind of determine the age, because these were used in the 60s, 50s, 60s. They've been used throughout, but when they started being more common, I guess I would say. You can also tell, flip this bolt handle back out of the way, this is not the original trigger, or, well, it's not the original trigger because it doesn't have any proofs or serial numbers on that. But other than that, that's really the only non-original parts that are on the firearm. But as you can see, it's had extensive modification to the barrel. Well, I guess you couldn't see the end here, but it's had the front sight removed and the rear sight base removed as well. Now, could this be restored? Probably, because, grab my Mitchell's Mausers from over here. If you compare the barrel profile, they didn't actually change, they didn't do anything to the barrel profile to alter it. They just removed the rear sight and the front sight. So you could, theoretically, put a new rear and front sight on it, and you could really restore many of the pieces on this firearm and make it original again. Whether that be worth it or not, that's hard to say. Anyway, another way that I've kind of tried to nail this down to the early 60s is when I think this was sporterized, is because of this scope mount, which is a really neat scope mount. I like the way it works. You have two screws up here that attach to the scope ring, like so. And then you have a slit back here and a peg with a channel cut into it in the back. And this rotates, and when you get it to here where there's a flat spot, it lifts off to accommodate this threaded screw. This is also a Bueller. And when I was trying to find the exact date on this mount, I couldn't find an exact date. I did see a patent drawing for the mount dated 10/21/1947, signed MP Brewer. So that's when it was originally came to be, but then they also, I'm going to pull this mount back off of here. But then they also manufactured mounts for quite a long time until the early, not in the early 2000s. They were bought out and they were still available on the market till the early 2000s, I believe. And another clue as to where I think this is the early 60s rather than the later 60s is this is a Japanese imported Bushnell Scope Chief. Not a Scope Chief 2, which I had a hard time nailing down when the Scope Chief itself was introduced. But I did see a catalog listing for the Scope Chief 2 from 1967. So I would imagine that put this some point before 1967. Now, another kind of interesting thing, I don't know if it's really interesting, but it's something you can encounter out there. This firearm itself is a friend of mine's, and he was given it by another gentleman who just had no use for it. So that's something that you never know. You may be able to find or pick up relatively cheaply. Something like this that you, maybe if you wanted to go ahead and keep sporterizing it, you could sporterize it out. Or if you wanted to try to return it back to stock, or not stock, but original factory condition, you could try to do that. Not only that, but it also came with something else I hadn't seen before, which this is a 3-round detachable magazine for a K98K. Hold on one moment, let me grab the stock for my K98K. It's still got my trigger guard in it. Now I couldn't get this to actually seat correctly, but the general idea is it goes in like this, and as you can see, that little grip area there pulls back. Now I couldn't get it to go into mine, and I maybe could have forced it, but honestly I don't want to do that, especially when I don't have the action in the stock. But the other thing it came with, which was interesting, is this reproduction trench magazine, which I will put into my stock just so you can see how it fits in there. But before I do that, because the feed lips are in the receiver, it's got a pin to hold the spring and everything inside the magazine. One second here, so I don't shoot this into my face. I mean, it would be hilarious, but since you can't see my face, it wouldn't be as funny as you think. Okay, there we go. That's out of there. Now, if you're going to put it in the gun, you wouldn't do that. I mean, if you're going to actually use it on the firearm, you wouldn't do that. But for the purposes of just showing how it fits, it just rocks in and then clicks in the back. And this is a reproduction trench magazine from what I could see. I highly doubt that this would be an original trench magazine. I mean, you never know. It could be. But there you go. That's how it attaches to the stock and what it generally looks like. And I think maybe I might ask him if I can borrow this magazine and do maybe a couple videos shooting this once I have the funds to pick up enough K98 or enough 8mm Mauser to fill this magazine. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope maybe you found something interesting or informative about it, and maybe you'll take another look at some of the rifle or barreled actions you might see out there, because you never know, you could find something really interesting. And this is interesting for two reasons. Not only is it a World War II bolt action rifle, but also it's a post-World War II surplus rifle. And you know, it's hard to say. It could have been a GI bringback, or it could have just been one of the many that came through after the war. Either way, it's a cool piece of history, and you never know where you might be able to find one. So, appreciate you watching. If you liked the video, go ahead and hit the like button. If you watched some of my other videos and you enjoyed those too, I'd appreciate if you subscribed. If you have anything else to say or any other interest, go ahead and comment below. Thanks, and have a good day.